Hi, everyone. We're just going to take a few quick moments to make sure that everyone has gotten on, so bear with us.
Yeah, I do know that GoToWebinar is having some technical difficulties, so we want to give it a couple minutes for those who are trying to join. Thanks everybody for understanding. If you just joined and you're wondering if you're not having audio, we are here. We're just waiting for a couple minutes. Thanks.
All right, guys. Well, it is 1:03, so I'm going to get us moving. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining today. My name is Michael, and I am a part of our marketing team at Proficient. So on behalf of our entire team, I just wanted to say thank you for joining today's webinar. Before we move on to our presentation around Project Cortex, I wanted to review a few basic housekeeping items. First, feel free to submit any questions you may have during the presentation today by typing them in the chat window located within your window itself. Please be sure to state your questions clearly, and our speaker will address those as time allows. If you still have any unanswered questions after the webinar, or you would like to request information about our services, please feel free to reach out to our speakers directly. You can also fill out the contact us form located on proficient.com's website. Please note though that today's webinar is being recorded and you will be sent that along with our slides that you will see within a few business days. And now that we've covered a few webinar related items, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker today. On the call with us, we have Joel Olson. He's a Microsoft MVP director, or Microsoft MVP and a director of Microsoft practice. So Joel, turning it over to you.
Great. Thanks for having me today. It's great to be here. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I am excited to talk about Project Cortex. I think this is one of the most exciting things that Microsoft's actually doing this year. I've been part of the early access program, the content services program at Microsoft, and I've just been ecstatic over the last year. Just can't wait for Project Cortex. I kind of see this as Microsoft's first product built on top of their AI platform, like across the board. It's really, really incredible just how much it takes advantage of everything that Microsoft has invested in at Microsoft 365. I just want to mention my blog, collabshow.com. I do have a couple of Project Cortex articles out there. I've also been blogging on the Proficient blog. In fact, I just posted something just yesterday where I kind of dove into the Knowledge Center and the Content Center with a little image you're going to see a little bit later. But before we get started, just a little bit on who we are, who Proficient is. We're one of Microsoft's go-to partner, trusted partner in the Microsoft ecosystem. We do digital transformation for companies, and we've actually been really busy with what's going on these days. And at the same time, I would say, those of you, we totally understand these crazy times that are happening. We actually have been doing a number of COVID-related webinars. We did one on security last week on Teams. There's been kind of this COVID series that we've been doing around crisis management. Proficient, it has 26 offices across the US, including some development centers overseas as well. We are a publicly traded company. You can find us on the NASDAQ. We've got, just last year, we had over $500 million in revenue. So you've got a very scalable partner when you work with us as well. Over 3,500, 3,700 employees. And our Microsoft practice, we've been very involved with Microsoft, helping people move to the Microsoft cloud. And we not just the productivity cloud, but we do a lot with Azure, data, security, telecom, over 350 consultants who are working here at Proficient on Microsoft. And like I mentioned, it's kind of crazy times. We actually have built some offerings related to that, including some free virtual consultations and workshops. So feel free to, if you need help, to reach out. You'll see my email at the end, but as well, feel free to respond in either the chat or the questions window. In fact, that was one thing I was going to call out. There is a question and answer part as well as the chat. So if you're having trouble or needing help, feel free to chat. But if you have questions for the webinar, just use the question and answer panel. And with that, our agenda for today, we're going to go into a little bit about how we got here. Want to talk about the Project Cortex announcements. And essentially what I've done is I've built some of my own visuals around Project Cortex. I want to help you kind of put your mind around this. And then kind of the highlight or the real key takeaways is around planning for Project Cortex. So Project Cortex, this is that image I was referring to. I've been kind of just trying to break this down a little bit. As far as AI goes, there's really two worlds here. There's machine learning, where with the machine learning, Project Cortex will essentially reason over your data. It can cluster, extract, group, and filter automatically. This is the really cool part of it, is the fact that it leverages machine learning and it gets better and better understanding patterns, understanding what's trending, recognizing terms, and it can recommend these terms and that are then essentially validated or approved into the knowledge center. And this knowledge center is a lot like a Wikipedia for the organization. The other side of the world, we have this content center, and the content center is focused on machine teaching, where you essentially can take samples of your own documents and teach AI, and then it can essentially classify documents, extract data, do modeling, AI modeling and automation, build these models around your documents, around your processes, and essentially connect it with the Power Platform and build out automation related to invoices or statement of works or POs, the kinds of documents that you use in your organization. And there's an important piece where humans are involved. I call it reinforcement, or I think in the AI community they call it reinforcement, where essentially this is where you can configure the mining of what it's focused on. So yes, you absolutely can block the topics. You can manage what it's actually focused on. If there's sensitive content, you can absolutely exclude it from what's being looked at. And as well, you can connect to other data sources, or either import taxonomies or update your taxonomies, add terms, number of different things you can do here. And when you talk about this whole space, and I know we're kind of just diving right in, but I kind of wanted to start with this image of what is Project Cortex. When I think about this space of what is the value of having AI in the enterprise, what is the value of being able to use a machine to be able to make us better, it takes me back to a quote. Lou Platt, who was a CEO of HP, he said, if HP knew what HP knows, it would be 3 times more profitable. And I think I've seen that same quote with the word productive as well, to be 3 times more productive. So if you think about that, 3 times more profitable if it knew what it knew. Well, a lot of what that is people in different departments or people even on the same team who don't realize the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So the more connected we are, the more transparency across the organization we can be, how much more productivity does it add if we can enlighten each other? What does it mean for a new employee who can very quickly ramp up because of the terms and the acronyms and all this cultural knowledge that needs to be learned over time? Because information management really does have some challenges today. And I kind of mentioned a little bit of those in those illustrations I was talking about. These silos of information. Silos as in there's different systems who have different information, even within a department, where CRM has your customers in it. Your SharePoint environment has a lot of your collaboration. Teams has a lot of your chat. OneDrive has a bunch of your personal files, and that's just the Microsoft ecosystem. When you start saying, well, our real data is in some FileNet system, or we've got a big filing cabinet that has all of our employee data in it. Well, what if we could find ways of connecting information? And even search has been this goal for many, many years, where we end up, if we could reuse what we've built, as in templates, we're always searching for things to say, hey, somebody's got to have done this before. And then eventually we give up after so many futile attempts. Sometimes we find things that are interesting, but how do we know whether it's authoritative or not? Who are the experts who worked on that project that now is defunct, or somebody started a couple years ago? Maybe somebody did an intranet project a couple years ago. Where can we go and find those things for Project Blue Book? And then as well, there's the knowledge gaps, finding the experts, sharing knowledge, the gap between tacit and explicit knowledge, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then, like I said, there's this ramp up for new employees. And then there's the people who are leaving your organization and they've got all this knowledge in their head as they walk out. How do we make sure that that knowledge drain isn't happening? So let me kind of just get a little bit tactical here. There's 2 types of knowledge that I'm going to focus on. I think there's even more, but you could say the world is divided up into these 2 types at a minimum. There's tacit knowledge, which is experience. This is your cultural, tribal knowledge that you gain based on doing something. That's actually most of the knowledge in the world. It's what's in people's heads. It's this 95% of knowledge. It's competence and things that we've done. It's our how-tos and all that kind of stuff. And then the other side of it is what's in documents and records and files. It's actually the knowledge that's actually been captured and is stored in records and files and information. It's this explicit knowledge. It's now been captured, and so we call this explicit knowledge. With the tacit knowledge being that that cultural tribal knowledge. You can see it's only about 5% that's actually been captured. So when you start talking about people walking away, they're retiring, or they go from one job to the next and they're only spending, they spend, even if they spend 5-10 years in the organization, how much of that knowledge has been stored as explicit knowledge in some awesome knowledge base that can be then mined? That's where the power is. And how do we tap into that tacit knowledge, and how, even with the explicit knowledge, do we connect the people to that knowledge? Because information is power. I mean, the people are valuable resources, but far more if it's shared with others. How do we incentivize people to share? If they feel like, hey, when I save it in a Word doc, I have no idea, I save it in some SharePoint site somewhere. How do I know somebody's actually going to be able to refer to it and use it? Just because it was captured as explicit knowledge in a document, how do we know it's going to be unlocked, or that people will be able to leverage it? So in the industry, and this is where we kind of go back in history, back in the beginning, we had things like keyword search, and keyword search has been around for a long time. Even before SharePoint was a thing, there was keyword search. There was index server. I remember using index server even like with the first release of IIS. You get these IDX files where you could essentially do keyword search on your web pages. So keyword search is very, very old, where it's just trying to do pattern matching. Semantic search is natural language processing, where it's actually indexing them, and you can add some weight to whether it's in the title versus in the document, or even that idea on the web of PageRank. PageRank is an example of something that leverages that idea of kind of semantic search. And contextual search takes things to the next level, where in the SharePoint world we said, oh well, if it's on the root of the portal, then it's going to be boosted in rank. And then we as well kind of take advantage of more of the machine learning, where it's understanding trends, it's understanding what people are searching for, and it's taking those things into context. Now, the next generation of search is this cognitive search, where we're actually looking at interactions and how humans are actually working at things. And when you start talking about how Project Cortex takes this even further, it has things like no-click search, where all you have to do is be on the search page, and you get that drop down from either office.com. You go to office.com, and boom, you see all of these connections of documents you've been working on, the ones your colleagues have been working on. So we want to reduce the resistance to being able to get good suggestions. On a desktop, all you got to do is hit the Windows button, and it can tell what you've been working on. And you do a search anywhere, and you're getting contextual information that's based on a lot more. And this is as well this idea of, I'm just having a conversation with somebody in Teams or on Yammer, or I'm getting a Word doc, and I'm starting to see terms that are essentially searches behind the scenes, where it's like, this is a topic. And we'll dive more into what that is, but you can see how this naturally is progressing toward an evolution of increased discovery and retrieval, making it the resistance to being able to find data not having to be something that we have to explicitly go and search for. It's actually something that's integrated in what we do every day as part of the productivity tools we use even. Now, imagine a knowledge network where we have a topic, and from that, we can find experts and files and people and sites and communities that relate to that, as well as other topics that relate to that. And that this idea of the knowledge network is really at the core of what we're talking about in relation to Project Cortex. And as Microsoft essentially defines knowledge management, and when they say, hey, Project Cortex is the future of knowledge management is this idea, it's this process of capturing, distributing, and using knowledge. And you'll often see this around Project Cortex concepts, is this idea of capture. Okay, what is the capture? It's this collecting, classifying, creating. We want to like leverage templates. We want to leverage our digital forms. We want to leverage any even kind of scanned content where we're capturing content. And then there's the next step of distributing it. How do we essentially share or manage or make it more retrievable, the discovery side of it? And then there is the using it, the consuming it, reuse, enhancements, extraction, the processes that kind of go off from that do automation inside of the business. So this process we're talking about here, that's obviously very repeatable, of what knowledge management really is at its core. Now, when we talk about Project Cortex, this is a Microsoft slide. This is one where they're essentially describing what is Project Cortex. And I'm just going to kind of talk to these high level, but you can see 3 different screens. The first one here, we're looking at an Outlook email, and you can see this is the idea of empowering people with knowledge and expertise in the apps they use every day. It's this idea that I can see a topic right inside my email, and it's highlighting those right inside of my experience. Then the next one here is automatically connecting and organizing knowledge across teams and systems. This idea that essentially we have this connected knowledge network where the people are connected to the files and processes are connected, just kind of like that ontology of topics that's extracted from our taxonomies, extracted from these different hero destinations, as they call them, with reusable web parts based on expertise and so on. And then the last piece here is this management. Managing and protecting content with AI and built-in security and workflow. And I think that when you start talking about the value, there's probably less who are going to invest in this in the beginning, but in the long run, this may actually be a huge area where people will gain the most explicit value, where when you say, here's a keyword, based on this word, whenever it shows up anywhere, I want those documents to automatically be classified as sensitive. And so even this idea of extracting and then classifying unstructured content, whether it's forms, documents, images, audio, video, really wherever it finds stuff that's sensitive, it being able to then take action and recognizing that data. And the content center, which is this other center we kind of talked about, is this ability to train the AI based on our documents, based on finance can train it on finance documents, HR can train it on HR documents. And so when it sees those things, it can then use those models to extract the metadata, kick off business processes, and so on. So Microsoft uses a very simple little image, this idea that here you've got your content, it's presented up to AI, and the AI reasons over it and highlights those topics as topic cards and topic pages in knowledge centers, with this intention of integration of those things across the productivity tools we use every day, like in your email, like in SharePoint, and in Teams, in the conversations we have every day. So we're going to now jump into a demo so you can actually see this a little bit closer firsthand. Now, the first place we're going here is actually retrievable by everybody at home. All you got to do is type in aka.ms/Project Cortex. And that's a short link to this page we're at right here. And you'll see that link later on in the presentation as well. But notice there's a link there for if you want to join in the updates and preview. Notice as well, it even says it's going to be released in the first half of 2020. So that's exciting. Project Cortex has office hours every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Cool. They announced a bunch of stuff at Ignite. You can see a bunch of the presentations and recordings. Here you can sign up for the private preview. And if you keep scrolling, a lot of people stop at that form, but if you keep scrolling, you'll notice there's some videos here, including a customer reference, Mott McDonald, where they have this vision of connected people to knowledge and knowledge to people, which is a really cool vision. And there's a nice 90-second walkthrough here video. There's the Microsoft mechanics where Naomi goes, it's a real deep dive into Project Cortex where she actually does some training, so basically building an AI model. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this little demo right here called Empower People with Knowledge. And this is a clickable demo. So this is one you guys can do at home. Click Begin Demo, and here you can see we're already right in it. This is basically, it's kind of a screenshot-driven demo, but you can see we're in email, and in Nestor's email that he sent to whoever this is, to Megan probably, we have a word called core. And we're like, oh, well, what is core? This is some acronym, right? And we're like, well, what's core? Well, if we click on it, it gives us a topic card. And here in the topic card, we can see this is an acronym. We have a definition for the acronym. The acronym itself is called Construction Operations Reliability. Now, if I was a new employee or even somebody else on another team and somebody said, hey, here's what's going on with core, I'd be like, what's core? So that idea of this captured knowledge, this topic card was written by AI, and it's connected to experts who have validated it. And you can actually see when we actually go through to it in a minute, but you can see other people are contributing to this. We can see there's other related topics. We even have start and end dates for this topic. And if I was somebody who was an expert on this, I could click suggest and edit. Or if I'm somebody who's interested in this, I could click the follow to follow this topic. Now we want to click over here to go into where the content is, and you can see here we are. Notice we're now in SharePoint. We're in a SharePoint modern site. Those of you who know what modern means, that's important because basically you need to get from classic to modern for pages to be able to take advantage of this. Not if you have some modern sites, those modern sites, anything new will be able to take advantage of this. But if you have things on classic, those will need to be updated. So here we are looking at a modern SharePoint page, and you can see right in the page itself, it's even recognizing that here we have construction operations reliability. There's that connected project as well that we were referring to earlier, Project SOAR. And if we click on this one, we get the topic card again. But instead of just scrolling down on the topic card, we want to click through and go to the topic page. So here we are in the Knowledge Center, which is essentially leveraging SharePoint. It's actually built inside of SharePoint as a special hero destination, as they call it, where I can see my topics. There's LinkedIn Learning, there's some Contoso, where Contoso is our company. So there's some additional knowledge that has been shared here. We have a set of experts related to this topic. I can click edit and add more knowledge web parts. I scroll down a little bit and you can see here's a bunch of resources that have been discovered or added. Notice there's two settings here. We have the discovered content as well as the added content. I click here and I actually go a little bit further down on this topic page, and you can see I get this really cool ontological model that shows me the relationship between my topic, including some trending topics, that show me relationship between my project and the other projects, or starting with core and its relation to SOAR and Mark 8 and beyond. I can actually navigate across these other topics and read more. So essentially, think about that from an educational perspective of how everything's really connected. I scroll down a little bit further and you can see, hey, there's some things happening in a community where this is a Yammer community where there's conversations happening where somebody's asking about core and somebody's even marked the best answer. So we can see there's some Q&A related to this topic as well. So there's things happening in relation to this. All right, so that's the first demo. There's one other demo I'm going to show you real quick. I think that this is really relevant. So basically that first one was the Knowledge Center. This next one I'm going to be showing you is the Content Center, okay? And again, these are ones you can go and spend as much time with as you'd like. Here we are in the Finance Content Center. Notice the word Content Center. So there's two centers, Knowledge Center, Content Center. But with Content Center, we can have as many content centers as we want. So we can have organizational-based content centers as well. So I click New, Document Library, just like in SharePoint. We create this new library so now we have this Purchase Orders Content Center. We're going to leverage something called the AI Builder, which is part of the Power Platform. and part of Power Apps. And you can see here's a form, and it's saying, hey, what you're going to need to build this AI model is you're going to need 5 sample documents with the same layout. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab those documents. We need at least 5. We grab a bunch of them, and we select those. Let's go train our model. Okay, well, now it has those documents, it's looked at them, it's come back now and said, hey, here's the fields we found in common across all those purchase orders. And we're talking about digital documents that are essentially kind of like a template. We can call these semi-structured documents, where essentially here's where the vendor information goes, here's where the purchase order date and number go. And notice as we select these, it's adding them here over as selected fields. We want to make sure that we add a bunch of these fields, our totals and the comments. And notice we're mapping these fields across all these sets of documents. We're basically training it on what matters in these documents. And so here's our selected fields. These are based on data sources, the uploaded documents. So you notice that we can train not just on uploaded documents, but other types as well. And the model is training. I love this little illustration of the guy with the gear on his head. So now it's training. This is going to take a few minutes, but because this is the demo, it doesn't take that long. We click through, training complete. We're ready to publish this model. Now that the model exists, we can actually use it in other places. So right now we've got a Power Apps model, but there's also a flow, or essentially a Power Automate flow to this, because we want the extraction to happen. Here's our selected fields. We're going to publish this. We're going to create that process to do the extraction. It's essentially taking SharePoint data, leveraging the CDS model to then build this out. So now here we have our library has been trained. It has the AI model attached to it. There's also a flow that's connected to it. We upload, we choose POs, and boom, within a very short period of time, our PO numbers are extracted, our vendors are extracted out of what could be either scanned content, structured content, where it's pulling all this data out. And with these models, you can actually train them to get better and better. So it has a confidence level and so on. But essentially, you select a document, and now we've got all that metadata attached to it. And you can imagine, now that we have all this metadata, hey, what do you want to do with this content? Do you want certain regions managed by certain people? Do you want to kick off some flows? Do you want to, obviously now these are going to be so much better from a search experience, but also from a process experience as well. So that's the second one. So let's jump back into our deck. All right, so we're going to be able to fly over this now just because the demo did work properly. But you see highlighted topics across the platform. Here you can kind of see our topic cards in SharePoint. They also happen in Word. So since in the demo we didn't see the Word one, you can see here's a highlighted term, Project Core, and you can see our highlighted topic. And here we have the little bar that basically pops out. So you can right click on this, choose this, and it does, you can either search for these topics right inside of Word, or you can essentially hit the smart to get over to it. Now what's happening is data mining, right? It's essentially extracting, grouping, clustering, filtering. So this idea is it's giving us definitions for an acronym. We have related people, related sites and files and meetings and videos and so on, our related topics as well. We saw this ontological model a bit earlier, where you see core and its related topics. People, right? We want to connect people to knowledge. Well, if you go to your profile now in this new world, you can say, it suggests topics to be in your Ask Me About in your profile, where you can say, oh yeah, add envirotech, or I can manually add topics, giving me a nice little drop down of topics that I care about, or not even just care about. These are the ones I'm an expert. And when you then go to those topic cards, those can be validated, but essentially, here's the experts who really know something about these topics. There's the Knowledge Center. We looked at that earlier. Here's something new, the Knowledge Bot. So this idea that I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're talking about a relevant topic, and I ask a question to somebody, I get a really nice answer, and I'm like, hey, this is good. Hey, Knowledge Bot, add question and answer as part of construction operations reliability, where then it basically says, I'll add this conversation to this topic as questions and answers. So that's how easy it is in Teams even to take something that I would consider tacit knowledge, or the tacit knowledge that is now being captured and being stored. So now there's also a number of web parts. I mentioned that on those special topic pages, we can edit those pages and add things like trending topics or the expertise finder or adding in feeds. We can basically make those really rich, and automatically a bunch of that happens. Basically, we can configure and control some of that experience. We've got the content center, which we looked at. There's also connectors. So one of the common questions people have is, hey, this is great for the Microsoft ecosystem, but what about stuff outside of that? Well, Microsoft has actually built a number of connectors and has connected with partners to where there's hundreds of connectors that will be available. There's an ingestion API where if you want to build against the API, there's an indexing API or the query API. So some examples that are already available as part of the preview. We've got Windows File Share, ServiceNow, Intranet websites, Azure Data Lake, Salesforce, and like I said, partners have built a ton more than this even. So what does this architecture look like? This is a Microsoft kind of look at it. Hey, this is where your users are discovering knowledge. We've got the topic cards and pages, the Knowledge Center, the Content Center. Hey, it's backed by graph and AI. There's the connections and so on, AI builder, machine teaching, and so on. Microsoft Search is a big component to that. So as well, when you start saying, well, what are all these different parts and components to Project Cortex? I spend a lot of my time talking about the Knowledge Center, which is it's basically once you enable it, you're licensed for it and so on. The SharePoint knowledge, it's inside of SharePoint, okay? Project Cortex Knowledge Center is that knowledge repository that I refer to it as kind of this organizational Wikipedia. Then there's the Content Center. And the Content Center is where we do our machine teaching. It's the Power Platform stuff like Forms Builder and AI Builder, where we do that teaching, which you saw in the demo. And then like the Knowledge Bot and the Yammer Q&A, there's knowledge capture that's happening in conversations that we have every day with experts, where we're saying, hey, this is good stuff. How do I keep this? Like, how many times have you been in a conversation with somebody and you're like, that answer is gold. I need to save that. And so you try and DM yourself, or you try and save it as an image on your desktop. Well, that doesn't help the rest of the team. Now we have a way of actually capturing the knowledge and storing it with a topic. And that's awesome. And we have the connectors. We just talked about all the connectors. There's already 7 that they're planning, plus, with all the partners and so on. And then there's what happens and lights up in your client. This is the user interface, is the knowledge insights, where it's highlighted in tools we use every day. Another thing that kind of a visual that I've been focused on is this idea that there's a cycle that's going on, where essentially AI is reasoning over indexed mined content managed in Microsoft 365 and connected systems. It's then cracking open those images and doing text and image-based recognition and extraction. It's learning based on machine learning in content types. It's extracting data based on taxonomies. It's mining content in the content center. You're doing your machine teaching and enhancing what is actually stored in the graph as it relates to people or as it relates to knowledge in these files. Topics are then recommended by AI, things like projects, products, terms, processes, acronyms. Those are then curated and validated by experts that are by default security trimmed and built into topic pages. Even topic pages can be trimmed as well. You can control security on those pages on that recommended content. The topics are organized into this knowledge center, and then now that they're approved and they're then highlighted across the tools we're using every day. So in the emails, in the chat, in the Word, and so on. As the clients get updated, we'll start getting enhancements coming into the tools we use every day, and so on. And on the right-hand side, this is more of the machine teaching side, but we have our content center with our structured libraries, where we're doing the AI builder and building out our models. We're building out our forms. We are capturing knowledge inside of teams by leveraging the knowledge bot. We're having forum type questions and marking our answers as authoritative and saying, yes, this is the right answer. We don't care about all the forum conversations that don't have the right answer. We care about the ones that actually have the question and answer pairs that we want to keep. And then we have the search connectors that pull in external data as well. And we're not talking just cloud data, we're talking on-prem data as well. You know, we really want to get at where is your organizational data. Now, what can you do? What do we do getting ready for Project Cortex? I've actually kind of put together some tactical things, and I know there's a lot here, but essentially just some top of mind things, classic to modern UI. That's an easy one. That's low-hanging fruit. You can get your SharePoint environment ready to be able to take advantage of this. Search. Acronyms is a feature that already shipped. You can start populating your acronyms. Your information architecture, where you can start building your teams and your sites into hubs. That structure will help in terms of organizing the knowledge, making it easier to navigate the organization. Instead of having all these silos, how can we actually build a structure? Profiles. You can enhance your profile so that when people go to somebody, they can trust the data. There's so many profiles that just have legacy or irrelevant data. It's like, hey, is that person actually in the building that says he's in? Well, how can we make sure that our profiles are trusted? Data cleanup. Yeah. Archiving, deleting, expiring. How about some sensitivity, right? How about some retention? Like classifying our data. What about DLP? You know, have you touched that yet? Wouldn't it be great to be able to block credit cards and ID numbers, especially in this world of GDPR and CCPA and all these other compliance things that are going on in this world? Plan. Yeah, think about roles. Who owns information management or knowledge management? Who should help us to champion the idea of the knowledge network and connecting people to knowledge? And how are you going to be able to even build that business case for why Project Cortex? And then discover, right? Your enterprise retention policies, your departmental structures. So as an example, a lot of people haven't invested in taxonomy, or if they did, it was 7 years ago. Guess what? This can take advantage of that. It can give you a head start in terms of what it's learning. I'm not saying you have to, but I do believe that this is going to enhance the AI if it can actually understand industry terms, if you have a good taxonomy. And speaking of taxonomy, there's one partner in particular who actually had built some general purpose taxonomies called WAND. and they actually have one you can go and download, which can essentially give you a head start on building out taxonomies. And they actually have a number of industry taxonomies as well. So what's next? What's upcoming? I mentioned that there's a number of these remote work webinars. There's a virtual team summit that's coming up on the 20th. It's a free one. It's a full day focus on teams. You're wondering how to get to that? Check out. There'll probably be links in the emails that go out. But as well, this deck, you can just click through on the deck. There is actually an upcoming event, a virtual event in May 27th. Mark your calendar, May 27 and 28, where Jeff Teeper, Naomi Moneypenny, a bunch of people from Microsoft, John Levesque, Bill Bear, they're doing this thing we're calling the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. I'm one of the organizers working on this project. You can go there, m365virtualmarathon.com. It's a free virtual event. We're going to have more than 100 sessions. It's going to be awesome. Maybe more than 200. There is some groups that I've created on Facebook and LinkedIn called Microsoft Project Cortex. So go check those out. They're the only ones that are out there right now. So those are brand new Project Cortex groups where you can catch up with things. I've already started posting some stuff there. I've added some moderators. Let me know if you want to get involved in those groups. And with that, let's open it up for some questions. All right. So let's see what we got here. So while people are putting in their questions, I'm just going to let you know if you had any questions you want to reach out to me directly, there's a couple different ways you can find me. There's my email at the top, joel.olesen@perficient.com. There's also Twitter. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. Send me a message. My LinkedIn. I for the most part, I do support that. But yeah, if there's anybody who has any questions, use the Q&A. All right, I see one here. When is Project Cortex going to be available? Okay, so that's a good one. Naomi Moneypenny and her team have continued to push that basically they're going to ship in the first half of this year. Now with COVID-19, a lot of us have been wondering if that's still the case. As I understand it, is still the case. We haven't heard anything otherwise. This next question here. Who has access to public preview? So public preview is something, so there's private preview very frequently, and then there's public preview. We're still in the private preview, where on that aka.ms/Project Cortex site, you saw that little form you can fill out. Anybody who's interested in the release and interested in information related to this, I highly encourage you to go and check it out. Go fill that form out, and you'll be able to essentially be in touch with Microsoft as they get closer to whether it's a public preview or whether it's a release. They'll be able to talk to you. This next question, how is GDPR and HIPAA compliance being addressed with AI? So the first part of that question, when you talk about GDPR is something where if people have PII data, where there's essentially, we're talking about personally identifiable information. So it's very important for you to be able to recognize if there's a location where you're storing social security numbers or ID from a compliance perspective from Microsoft 365, go into the Compliance Center. There's actually a GDPR template that kind of has an action plan that you can follow related to the entire platform. My recommendation is to use classifications. So basically you want to classify your teams, classify your sites. I'm a big fan of the teams first strategy, where things are organized by teams into hubs so that they're easy to find and easy to locate. But sensitivity labels will say, as an example, any sites or any files, essentially, you'd have different levels of what's approved and what's allowed in the different classifications. So the next part of that is like say HIPAA. So as an example, with HIPAA data, you would absolutely want to seclude the HIPAA data where you have medical records and medical record numbers and so on separate from your general purpose collaboration data. And essentially being able to essentially keep that data separate and sanitized, because you have to be really careful about following that. And it ends up being processes that both the organization needs to follow, not just the platform. What about geotagging? So geotagging, you could say some of these, there's classifiers in the Azure side of what we've been talking about, where you can actually set up classifiers to look for terms. Let's say you were training a document and there is a location label somewhere on it. You could extract that location data and have it actually tag the documents and extract that location data and add it to a column on your documents, as an example. Is it possible to avoid the machine learns wrong, especially during the first period? Okay, so what's great is, think about it, the crawl, walk, run. Basically when AI starts, it's a lot like an infant. It's still trying to learn. So it does learn from your interactions as well. So basically it's going to be making recommendations. So when you start talking about best practices or things to focus on early on, absolutely, you want to train it on what really matters. And so I would actually keep it fairly restrictive in the beginning. As you start to train it, make sure you have a set of experts that you're coordinating with, keeping that team fairly tight and training it on the data. So as an example, you may want to start with projects. Hey, let's make sure all of our project names and acronyms are what we're going to focus on in the beginning. There's a lot of value in being able to see, it's like Project Blue Book. It's like, well, what is Blue Book? I know what a Blue Book is, but I don't know what Project Blue Book is. Well, being able to actually capture those things and being able to add the definitions to your acronyms, seeding your acronyms, seeding a good taxonomy can help, but as well, that validation screen, the saying, hey, I approve what has been recommended, absolutely important early on. Somebody here is asking about the recording. Yes, there is a recording that's going to be available. Absolutely, you can share this with your teams. The link to the recording will be emailed out to everybody. I mentioned on the very bottom of the screen that I will share the slides, slideshare.net/Joel Olison. That's where the slides will be. The recording itself will be, a link will be emailed to everybody who registered. And with that, if anybody has any more questions.
All right. Well, Joel, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you again to everyone for joining us today for the webinar. As Joel had stated, note that we will be sending the recording and slides of today's presentation to you following this. So thank you again for joining and have a great day.
Hey, I do see a couple more questions for those who are still on.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I do see one here that says, what controls are in place to prevent misuse and privacy issues. And I think one of the things I definitely want to emphasize in a huge way is that Microsoft has clearly recognized some of the mistakes, that you could say mistakes. Anyway, a lot of people were concerned and worried about what happened with Delve, where like, here's this system that uses, what's trending inside the organization, right? And Delve itself has kind of been sunset, essentially. This is totally different than Delve, and it absolutely is security trimmed. You are in control with anything that gets published because it's essentially validated and published. So even though it's AI that's recommending these things, it's humans that are saying, yes, this is good to go. And then even those places in the knowledge center, you can actually secure those even further. My recommendation is definitely leverage the blocks. You can block terms, topics, things from being able to be a topic. You can block those things as well. You can actually say include this whitelisted list, or you can even say here's a list of things that are blacklisted. So you, from a privacy perspective, you can tell it what to do and what not to do. So here's another question. This person's basically saying this is a compelling solution. Quick question, looking for knowledge management certification, understanding the actual knowledge management methodology will make sense now. I do think that the Project Cortex does kind of put things on its head, and that this is an opportunity to essentially, again, kind of relearn what knowledge management really means. And essentially it's this value of having this knowledge network where it's essentially humans partnering with the machines around being able to have good machine learning and machine teaching, where it actually adds a ton of value to the conversation. What are we doing with big migrations of O365, MS Teams, Internet already migrated in SharePoint Online? Is there any way we can leverage this right now as part of our migration to cloud, so that when we finish our transformation, we have Project Cortex ready environment? So let's just say that you're migrating your data to O365. What are the things you should be watching out for? Number one, make sure that your migration is considering modern UI. By default, a lot of the migrations do not move you into the modern UI. So I'm talking modern SharePoint. So if you're moving your data to modern SharePoint, make sure that you're getting out of classic, or at least for the ones that really matter, you're getting into the modern UI. Now, I've been involved in a bunch of migrations, and that's one of our considerations is, hey, how much of this legacy stuff do we care to make modern versus how much of it can we keep classic? So absolutely, if you're talking SharePoint, that's one of the most important things you can do. The other thing you can do is actually looking at the managed metadata service, especially your managed columns, looking at where the terms store, looking at where when Project Cortex connects to this data you've migrated, it was all migrated on one day. It's here's a bunch of stuff. It's not trending yet. How do we make sure when Project Cortex starts reasoning over this data that it can make sense of it? So I do think that there's value in taxonomy that really helps you organize the organization when it starts building its ontology, as well as the terms. So when it actually sees that people are using these terms in the documents, it can actually make good recommendations. I like this question. Are there Flow Azure Logic apps actions that can be launched if a term/topic is searched for? Now, I think I can't speculate too far on what has not been revealed, but this idea of having Power Automate and Logic apps being able to leverage topics, would I be surprised that the knowledge graph is exposing The APIs, no. I do think that Microsoft cares a lot about APIs. They care a lot about developers, and this idea of being able to say, hey, when there's a new topic, then do these things. You know, people can follow topics as an example, but let's say people want to know what's related to the topic they care about. And even ISVs who are trying to build things, or even inside of a business, hey, when anything relates to this topic, I want to know things, not just related to that topic itself, but in its network of things. Yeah, I can imagine APIs being able to be enhanced here. Another question, are there records retention controls for records and information managers that need to manage C-level information governance strategic issues? So let's clarify it this way. There are management controls for this. Like I mentioned, there's the blacklist, there's your inclusion list, or the block terms, the block topics, sorry, the what can be mined, should be mined, what should be excluded based on sensitivity. So there are a number of controls for records and information managers. If they're looking for C-level type information, the good news here is you can actually seed topics. You can actually create new topics directly into the UI. And I think we are about on time. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, hey, Joel.
Yeah, no, that's good.
All right. Well, thank you guys again, and we will be sending out the presentation recording plus the links to the slide as